Welcome Malifaux players, and today we're talking schemes, the other way that we can score in games of Malifaux. Schemes are different from strategies in that they are hidden at the start of the game and then revealed as you meet certain conditions throughout the turns. Like the strategy, unfortunately you cannot score this turn 1. It's a second edition thing for those that are returning. In today's video we're going to give you an overview of how each of these schemes play and some things to watch out for so that you're not making mistakes at the tabletop too. To help us in today's video, we will be using our Nekima crew and our Seamus crew again to just showcase the interactions in this. With this, we've got some models here that don't have shared same costs, but this is just an instructional video to show you how these different schemes are scored. The first scheme that we are going to talk about is Let Them Bleed. Let Them Bleed is a really easy one to score. The reveal is straightforward. You must have the highest cost models on the opposing player's team at half their health or less. So, if I just move our Seamus crew to the side very quickly, if we were to use our Nekima crew, and we have these models here. To score the first point of Let Them Bleed, I would need to have these two models, the Mature and the Cavern Nephilim, at half health or less. The Young Nephilim in this case wouldn't matter. However, if for example I was to kill the Mature Nephilim, that doesn't matter. What would then go to is the next two highest cost. At this point, we have to always be aware that they are the highest cost models. We also need to be really clear that in the weird event that you only have some low cost summon models left in your master, neither of these count. So summon models do not count towards the limit for Let Them Bleed, a really common oversight. At the end of the game, scoring is really straightforward. All we have to do is ensure that all models, excluding those with the summon upgrade, so I'll put our two dogs to the side here a second, have at least one damage on them. You can have one model from the starting crew that is at full health, but if you have two, then unfortunately you cannot score this endpoint. This will obviously happen at the end of turn 5. Our second strategy is deathbeds. And at the beginning of the game, you have to choose a type of marker, and this is really straightforward. You could choose a corpse, you could choose a scrap, you could choose a terrain marker generated by the crew, or, interestingly, and something that people are not always aware of, you can choose the strategy. So in this case, if I was playing plant explosives, I could choose the plant explosives marker. To score our reveal is nice and simple. All we have to do is kill a model within 2 inches of both one or more friendly scheme markers and the given marker. Because I'm playing Nekima, I am more than likely going to pick a corpse marker. So if my Mature Nephilim was able to kill the dead Doxy, I'd be able to remove this scheme marker to gain a victory point. The end point is straightforward as well. For each corpse marker on the opponent's half, I would need to have a scheme marker near them. Now, as a reminder, we cannot technically take the interact action to drop a scheme marker within 4 inches of another scheme marker, so you must bear this in mind. Obviously, there is interactions like triggers and things that just say drop a scheme marker in base contact. This would then allow you to drop that scheme marker and have them close to each other. This would be our way to score our end point for deathbeds. For power ritual, we need to be really aware of our deployment. In this game, I've got a standard deployment, which means I'm going to deploy in this half here with my Nekima crew. My Seamus opponent is going to deploy in the opposite half. To score power ritual, you need to have a scheme marker in a corner, not within your deployment zone, to score the reveal. So for this game of standard or wedge, I would need to get one either in this corner or the opposite top corner for my opponent. If I was playing on wedge or flank, in actual fact, I could do the diagonal corners. Typically, I would find that power rituals are a lot easier to complete on wedge and flank. No. Power ritual is a lot easier to complete on wedge and in some cases corner. For the endpoint, we need to have 3 scheme markers down, and these would need to be in opponents or neutral sides, and only a maximum of 1 in our deployment zone. So if this was our deployment zone for a standard deployment, the other 2 markers would have to be within 3 inches of the corner of our enemy's deployment zone. If it was a wedge game and this was my deployment zone, I could have any of these 3, but I could also have it in my own deployment zone. This would give me a lot more flexibility in the ability to score that end point. Our 4th game is In Your Face. This requires you to kill a model of cost 8 or higher within 3 inches of a master. This is now, having either of these here would be relevant. It doesn't have to be your master for the reveal. Okay, so if you've got a very long range shooty crew like Von Schill, you could potentially score this before opponents leaving the deployment zone or when they're bunched up together. The endpoint is really simple. The endpoint is that you have to get your highest cost model into the enemy's deployment zone. In this case, my mature Nephilim would have to survive the game and get it into the opponent's deployment zone. In the interesting comments that will come from this of cheeky shenanigans, you can take multiple models of the same cost and then have at least one of them complete that. So for example, as a Nekima player, I quite like taking no mature Nephilim and no cavern Nephilim, but taking 4 young, who are all cost 7. 1, it helps deny my opponent the ability to score the first point of In Your Face immediately, but it also means even if my models grow up into higher cost, these were the original highest cost models, and therefore all 4 would count. As long as one of them survives, I would be able to score the end point of this. Scheme 5 is deliver a message, and the reveal for this is straightforward. All you have to do is at the start of the game you pick a friendly model that is not your leader. You'll do this in the app, so it's really crystal clear. All you have to do after turn 1 is then, for the reveal, be within an inch of the enemy master with the chosen model, so in this case my mature Nephilim, and have them take the interact action. This will then reveal immediately, scoring you that point. As always with interact actions, there is some restrictions that you need to be aware of. So for example, although the mature Nephilim can deliver a message to Seamus, Bet Noir cannot currently deliver a message to Nekima because the mature Nephilim here has a 2-inch engagement. And as conveniently with a measurer, we can see that this model is currently engaged. The exception with this obviously is always being Don't Mind Me, which means you would get to take the interaction even whilst engaged. The endpoint is also fairly straightforward for this. At the end of the game, all you have to do is have a scheme marker, at least one, within 2 of the model leader. For mission 6, we're back to our wide camera angle, and in this one we're just going to imagine that this is our deployment zone and this is the enemy's deployment zone at the top here, just to make it easier for the camera. To score the reveal of outflank, you need a model within 3 inches of the edge of each table side and at least 1 scheme marker in either side. At that point, you can remove that scheme marker to gain the reveal. To score the endpoint of this is going to be straightforward. All we need to do is still have those models within 3 inches, but we need to have a scheme marker at both positions. Although I'm not a fan of this potentially on a standard or wedge deployment, in any game of Stuff the Ballots where we would have our markers on the edges and in the corners, it is a nice easy take, but can be quite predictable. In standard and wedge, I'm not so much of a fan of outflank, but I can see the value in any game of Stuff the Ballots where you'll end up having strategy markers in the same position as where you need to be. It does become quite predictable though, so please be aware of that your opponent has probably scouted that one out. As always, I would just like to shout out to our own little business here, which is Rampage Games. You're seeing a lot of scheme markers, corpse and scrap today because that's a lot of the scheme marker shenanigans. And if you want to get your own, we are gratefully here to help you and can even do custom tokens for you, meaning they're personalised to you, your crew, your faction, or your team. Mission number 7 is hold up their forces. This is a real easy one to score, but it can be again quite predictable if you're throwing lots of small little models into your opponent. To score hold up your forces, the reveal and end is the same, and all you have to do is have an enemy model of lower cost engaging a model of higher cost. So for example here I have a Dead Dandy of cost 4 with a Cavern Nephilim of cost 9, or I have Bet Noir with my leader of 15. As always, insignificant models do not count, and we have to also remember that if your model does not have a melee attack, it does not have an engagement. I've had multiple games where I've had myself or someone try and reveal that a field reporter is scoring hold up their forces, but unfortunately a field reporter does not have a melee and therefore does not have an engagement. It's now potentially time for one of the easiest schemes to score in the game. It is Espionage. It is also very predictable. To score the reveal point of Espionage, you need a scheme marker along the centre line. Now, interestingly, this does not have to be wholly bang slap in the middle. It can just be touching that line, but it needs to be in that line nonetheless. So if we have it here, and obviously just be careful of where terrain is placed in this. You also need a scheme marker in your enemy's deployment zone. This means that on games of flank and wedge, it's potentially easier. Corner makes it slightly more difficult because obviously you have a much smaller area to get those scheme markers in. For the endpoint, you need to have those 2 markers and one in your own deployment zone. This is probably the most popular game scheme taken, and you can see why. It has a very low entry cost, and probably when you've got a spare action, drop a scheme mark. For sweating bullets, we must first, before the game starts, choose a friendly non-leader model. This can be any model, as long as it is significant. It can be a minion, enforcer, or henchman. My personal recommendation would be an enforcer or minion, so you don't also potentially give this up in your game. At the end of the turn, if the chosen model is within 6 inches of the centre point and engaging an enemy master or henchman, you gain a victory point. Now, the wording on this is super important. So I have my 6-inch widget, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to remove my little bit of terrain here to reveal the dead centre, which is here. To score this, let's say that my Cavern Nephilim is the model. As long as my Cavern Nephilim is here, and it is engaging the enemy master, in which case is Seamus. Seamus, does not need to be within 6 inches, just the model that you are declaring, so this can be a nice easy one to get. Please be aware, obviously, with models with a bigger engagement, so if we weren't using a Cavern Nephilim, we were instead using our mature Nephilim, this would actually give us further reach and range. Even so, that we can get him out of the screenshot The end point of sweating bullets is also fairly straightforward. All you have to do is ensure there are no unengaged enemies or enemy henchmen or masters within 6 inches of the center point. So, for example here, I just have my Seamus model. If Seamus is within 6 inches of the center and unengaged, he would deny me the point. But as long as I had him engaged, I don't have to kill him. I can still score this point. Please be aware that if you kill all the enemy henchmen or masters, this also counts because there are no enemy henchmen or masters within 6 inches of the center. They do not have to be on the board for it to count. For information overload, this is a straightforward one. It is quite intensive though if you're not a crew that innately drops scheme markers as a coincidental factor. So by that I mean you're not taking actions to do it, it just happens. So for example in the Nakima 2, when models grow up, they drop scheme mark within 3. To score the reveal point, you have to have more friendly scheme markers completely on the enemy table half than they have in play. So this means that for your crew, they have to be on the enemy table half completely. So this one here on the middle line would not count. It would have to be over here, and obviously got 5 just very close together just to show you. And your opponent would have to have less. So let's, in actual fact, be a bit more interesting and cheeky about this. So let's say that I am the attacker. As you can see, I currently have 4 scheme markers, and the player is going to declare that I have scored information overload. I remove 2 of these scheme markers, and now, coincidentally, my opponent, who would declare their scheme second, could now also declare information overload. So be very careful when deciding and looking at priority for players, because this is the person who would have to reveal any scheme scored first, and this could heavily influence the ability for you to score information overload, particularly the reveal. The end point is nice and straightforward. At the end of the game, if there are more friendly scheme markers in play than enemy scheme markers in play, you remove 2 to score 1 VP. This could be 2 to 1, 1 to nothing, 2 to 1 because it can be 1 to nothing because you have to remove 2 friendly scheme markers. But the key thing here is for the reveal, it needs to be on the enemy table half, and your opponent gets the whole board. For the end point, it is the whole board. So potentially can be easy to score the end point, but realistically you're not wanting to cap yourself at 7 points. For take prisoner, we are going to make our lives really straightforward. At the start of the game, we have to choose an enemy, minion or enforcer to be our target. I could choose any of these or this in the Seamus crew. I've also got other models that would be valid. All I have to do is have a model, engaging that model, and have no other enemy models within 2 inches in line of sight. So, if I was here and my target was Bête Noire, unfortunately currently I wouldn't be scoring, but all I'd have to do is ensure that all of those models are outside of 2 inches and I would be able to score it. Ideal targets for this are models that particularly you think will go on a flank on their own. They are typically the ones that will be easy to get it on rather than being in the scruff and rough in the middle where they're all together. The end point is slightly harder because once you revealed it, the enemy can just try and counterplay you in so much that at the end of the game, if the chosen model is on your table half, you score the victory point, and if it is not, you do not. If you kill the model, you also do not score it, but if your opponent accidentally kills the model for whatever reason, then you would still score this point. Obeyed models do not count for killing this because they are still enemy controlled models just taking a friendly action. Mission 12 is protected territory. To score this at the end of the turn, you must have 2 scheme markers on the enemy table half, at least 10 inches apart. And the other caveat for this is you cannot have an enemy model within 3 of either of these markers. So currently this marker here would count, but this one would not because we have models near it. If the models were outside of 3, we'd be able to score it. The common mistake here is because it's very similar for the endpoint that people get confused and score it the wrong way round. For the endpoint, we must have a scheme marker on the enemy table half, at least 10 inches apart still, but we must have a model in our crew close to it. Having enemy models there do not affect our ability to score the end points. Our final scheme of GG4 is in Snare. This is a really easy one to potentially score depending on the crew you're running. If you're running someone like McCabe with the Wastrels or the Hucksters, they have false claim, and this allows you to drop 2 scheme markers within 3 of each other to get around the limitations. To score the first point of ensnare, that reveal, all you have to do is drop 2 scheme markers within 3 inches line of sight of a model that is not a minion. So, we have our White Rabbit Company here, who is our enforcer, and we have a dead Doxy. We would be able to remove these 2 scheme markers to score it off the White Rabbit Company, but if we just had the dead Doxy there, as a minion, she would not allow us to score our reveal. The endpoint of this, however, is for any enemy model that is significant again to score the last point. Again, the same thing applies. You need to reveal and remove 2 scheme markers within 3 inches of a single model. Hopefully, having watched this video now, you feel a little bit more confident about the different schemes that are available on offer during Gaining Grounds 4. As we come to more videos and more content and more future games, is that even a thing? I don't know, probably. When a new Gaining Grounds is released, we'll do another one with an update. As always, thank you for watching. Stay weird.